Jumping back into the action here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast, and we're going to be jumping straight back into all the action around the head coaching positions. And I really should say head coaching position, just one, because the Saints are the only team still that hasn't hired a new head coach. The Jets got their guy, the Bears got their guy, the Jaguars got their guy after a little bit of a back and forth. So now focusing on the Saints. And going back to Monday this week, it appears that the Saints are zeroing in on their top candidate for their head coaching spot. And it started on Monday after the NFC Championship game, where word got around that the Saints would be willing to travel to Philadelphia as soon as Monday, 2 days ago, and interview Kellen Moore in person. They already had a virtual meeting with him the week before, I'm pretty sure, during the lead up into the NFC Championship game, and assuming that went well because of the reports, and then without really letting any time pass, the Saints got on a plane and traveled to Philadelphia and started talking with Kellen Moore about their head coaching position. And the story checks out because the Saints then announced on Tuesday morning that they completed their second interview with Kellen Moore. And according to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, it seemed that the meeting went so well because he stated that it started on Monday night when, the Saints got there and they traveled over there, like I said. It started on Monday night and it concluded in the evening and early morning on Tuesday. And then you got the announcement from the Saints, obviously. So I don't know what you could be talking about for that long, first off. And then if you're going to be talking for that long, I'm sure there's got to be some sort of chemistry, some sort of sense of being on the same page when it comes to, if you're Kellen Moore, presenting your ideas, your identity, what you would ideally be as a head coach. And the Saints, for them to talk for you for that long, right, they must have hit it off, right? It must have been a pretty riveting conversation, right, for it to go that long. But it wasn't only ESPN that reported it, but also Fox Sports' Jordan Schultz referred to Kellen Moore as the leader in the clubhouse. Also from ESPN as well, Adam Schefter said that Kellen Moore is a lead candidate to take that job, and Mike Garafolo, another NFL insider from NFL Media, said that Kellen Moore remains the most likely candidate to take the Saints head coaching job. So all that being said, the Saints still can't hire him for as much as they probably love talking to him, for as much as, all these guys say that it's probably going to be Kellen Moore. The Saints still can't sign him because they got to wait until after the Super Bowl, right? They can't do anything in between. And for, I guess like tampering's sake and anything like that, the Saints got to wait. The Saints got to wait until after the Super Bowl to make any sort of announcement. But if it does happen, the Saints must be thinking, from what we saw this year with Kellen Moore and that offense in Philadelphia, right, with Saquon and all those guys, the Saints must be thinking, like, could you imagine what Kellen Moore could do with our great running back in Alvin Kamara, or what he could do with a young guy like Chris Olave, who, for me, feels like he's just about to have like a really impactful breakout year. I know he's had very good seasons, but with the Saints, not being as good, per se, I feel like we're on the cusp of seeing Chris Olave have a very impressive season, along with the Saints also having a unexpected, very competitive season. I feel like you could be close to that, and the Saints clearly feel that Kellen Moore brings them closer to that goal if he becomes their head coach. And doing some of the similar things that you had with Saquon in Philadelphia, you could probably do a good amount of them with Alvin Kamara, as great of a running back he is over in New Orleans. So that would be exciting. You have some exciting pieces there to work with, but it doesn't rule out all the other negatives and uncertainties, right, that come with every job. But I think this would definitely be more of a win for the Saints to get a guy like Kellen Moore, especially after the year he had this year. And for Philadelphia, after a historic season that was orchestrated by Kellen Moore, pretty much, it'd be unfortunate that they'd have to to then find another new offensive coordinator, like it's become a tradition almost in Philadelphia, because if Kellen Moore does go and sign with the Saints, this would be the fifth offensive coordinator that would work with Jalen Hurts in his career so far. And not only you would have to find a new offensive coordinator, it would be kind of late in the process, right? And, some of the top guys could already be interviewing with different positions and things like that. They could already be hired by the time, after the Super Bowl. There's still a lot of time left. And, if you start looking after that, it could be a very short group that you got to pick from. So it would be less than ideal, obviously, because like say you got to look for a new offensive coordinator and on top of that you lose the Super Bowl, right? Then nobody's happy at all, right? That's the worst case scenario. But yeah, this has oddly happened before for the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Because it's incredible how if the Saints do end up hiring Kellen Moore, it would be the second time in 3 years that the Eagles have played a Super Bowl in a city where the home team ended up hiring one of their coordinators. And it seems like a very niche stat, but the last time that happened was in 2022 when the Eagles played in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs like they are this year in Arizona. And after that Super Bowl, Jonathan Gannon, their defensive coordinator, was hired by the Arizona Cardinals. Now the same thing could be happening this year, but hopefully for the Eagles, they end up winning the Super Bowl at least, right? If they are going to part ways with Kellen Moore. And overall, while Philadelphia has been awesome to their own respect because of the enormous amount of talents that they have everywhere you look, right? It's some of the best players at those positions. But Kellen Moore certainly contributed to that, and you can tell and you could really make the comparison from last year where this team was virtually the exact same and they had a different coordinator in Brian Johnson, and we all know how much of a mess it was last year with Sean Desai and Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson, getting fired halfway through the year, and then also there was some confusion or some contradicting reports saying that he wasn't really able to run his offense. Nick Sirianni wanted to run his offense, leading into some stories into this offseason where Nick Sirianni said he was going to take a step back. And then on the defensive side, it was arguably more confusing because you had Sean Desai up in the booth, then he came down onto the field, then they brought in Matt Patricia, then they switched over the play calling duties and things like that. It was all a huge mess, and with so much talent everywhere, you can see the importance of these coordinators, and the Eagles hit it out of the park, obviously, this year with Kellen Moore coming over and Vic Fangio. So, they're not going to lose both guys like they did with Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, obviously. They could keep Vic Fangio if it ends up turning out that way. But losing a guy like Kellen Moore, I think, for all the talent that they have, is not something that you could just brush over, because we've seen it go very bad in a very recent, time over the last year or so. So that would be something that would be a pretty decent hurdle to get over. Again, especially starting so late. And going back to Jalen Hurts and how this would be the fifth coordinator for him in his NFL career, he actually mentioned that topic back in the spring where he said he'd like to see some continuity at that spot after having guys like Press Taylor in 2020, Sean Steichen for 2 years, Brian Johnson last year, and then Kellen Moore now this year, right? And it seems like they could be moving on again, and that could be troubling because, it's ironic because one of the biggest problems that people bring up in these failed quarterback experiences or failed top-rated, top-drafted quarterbacks is that they switch the coordinators too much, or they switch the coaches too much, and the quarterback can't really develop because there's so much, just switching from year to year. And it's almost the same situation here with Jalen, but to their credit, they've done a fantastic job of still being relevant and still being competitive for the kind of team that guys like Howie Roseman have built for them. But ideally, you'd want to see your coordinator stick around. And I don't think it's any surprise that when Shane Steichen stuck around for more than just 1 year, that's when Jalen Hurts was arguably playing some of his best football in comparison to right now. It looks different, but still, Jalen Hurts is playing some of the best ball. And, if I was an Eagles fan, I would love to see Kellen Moore stay, but it feels like the Saints have put all their chips to the middle of the table to try and sign Kellen Moore. So I expect this move to happen, and then we'll see where the Eagles go from there. But I would like to see the move. I think the move would benefit the Saints more than it would Kellen Moore, because I also would worry about the change that Philadelphia would have to make, obviously, and this would be a massive win for the Saints than rather a huge win for Kellen Moore, if that makes sense. So, yeah, we'll have to wait on that announcement officially, right? Because we can't do it right now, or the Saints can't do it right now. But it feels like we're getting closer to every opportunity, every opening being filled by some potential candidates. So we'll keep an eye out on that. But moving over from New Orleans, Louisiana, we're going to go over to Jacksonville, Florida, where Liam Cohen, we know, is the new head coach there, and he talked pretty passionately, I would say, about the offense and especially Trevor Lawrence and his plans for both of those aspects of the team in 2025. So we're going to discuss what Liam Cohen said at his press conference and just basically going over some of the things that he should target in doing in his first year. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.